welcome back to She Birds Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Wright, and today's guest is S.A. Schneider.
Good
Hi.
morning. Hi, Brooke. Well, actually, it's afternoon, isn't it? Yes,
Yeah.
for us.
I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's good to meet you and good to do this. I enjoy it.
You too. So, can you tell us what inspired you to start writing fantasy for middle grade readers?
Um, yeah, actually, it started years before I started writing. I was a Girl Scout leader for my daughter and other girls in the troop. And I
Oh,
noticed when they would come into a meeting, a lot of them read, pretty much all of them read at that age. And they were all reading these books that had male protagonists for the most part. And
oh,
I started thinking about it. I'm like, there's not as many books for girls at that time
yeah.
as like they don't have things for them. So I'm like, I'm going to write a book that the girls can read and that they could see somebody like themselves, another girl that's, the big powerful hero of the story. Because, middle grade, a lot of that to me is more, you need someone they can relate to and things like that. Well, by the time I actually got done dragging my feet, there were plenty of books for girls and a lot more than there were at the time. This was like 15 years ago now. And the first book I wrote, which was the one I had been thinking of, it was the first book I wrote. And as many authors will tell you, that's not the book to publish. So it's sitting on a shelf somewhere. It may get revised someday, but it's really not the best book in the world. But that got me on the road to what I wanted to write.
Oh, wow. So, what makes this age group magical for storytelling?
Well, when I first started talking about writing, my kids were that age.
Mhm.
And I remember that's the age I didn't start reading a lot, but I remember a lot of the books I read are still some of my favorites, still things I remember fondly. And it's more, to me, more fun to write and read some of those books in that age range style than some thrillers, some quote unquote adult books. I'm not big on Baldacci, who my mother loves, but what he writes, I'm not as interested in. There's plenty of other books like that aren't as fun, and these are just fun.
Oh, that's so cute. So, so can you tell us about your writing journey? How did your childhood love for Legos and figures evolve into writing your books?
Well, to me, it seems pretty straightforward. You just never grow up.
Yeah.
You're Peter Pan, still the child at heart. But if I sit around making Lego, which actually a lot of adults do nowadays, but
Yeah.
if I pull out the action figures and Lego and my kids aren't around, some people do think that's a little weird. To me, this is the same type of thing. You're starting with nothing and you're building something out of it, and it's playful. That's what action figure play is. That's what Lego play is.
Yeah.
As long as you're not just following directions, that's a totally different type of Lego nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. So was oh yeah. So so what does your was there a book or author that changed everything for you as a young reader?
I don't know if there was just one book or author because I read so much when I was younger, but I would probably say the book or the author that comes back to me the most, that has been with me the most in my life, is Stephen King.
Ah,
And that's very odd considering I write fantasy kids books, but the Stephen King, whether you like him or hate him, and I would, not disagree if you wanted to argue saying he doesn't know how to do endings really well sometimes,
yeah.
but he has the way to draw you into the book, to make those characters real, to make you not want to put it down and delve into those books. I know a lot of people say Patterson. Patterson doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Stephen King, like The Shining. That's one of my top 3 books of all times, and I've read it probably 5 or 6 times. And whenever I'm writing, I'm thinking of him a lot. Though, as I got older, my kids were starting to read, and I was reading to them and all that. I discovered Rick Riordan, and I realized his voice and style is closer to what I like to do for myself. And then the other one that I feel I'm trying to emulate or get to is Jeff Strand, who writes like adult comedy horror a lot, but he also has a bunch of middle grade books that many teachers tell him, you know what, I've got boys and kids in the class that won't read. I handed them your book. They read it and wanted another one. That's the goal.
Oh, okay. So did you like Stephen King's book that was after The Shining, Doctor Sleep? Did you like that?
The sequel, well, you know what? There's like 30 years difference. I was a totally different person when I read it. Um, it was okay, but I don't think anything is going to compare to me as much as The Shining does and did.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't bad. Of course, you know they put Ewan McGregor as the lead character in the movie, so that was enjoyable.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So in Transgression of Magic, Samuel faces truths about his father. What inspired that storyline?
The first book. uh, so the book started, the whole series idea, the first book started as a short story that I
Oh,
wanted to write to have available when I did the Wizarding World Festival at Kent State. They do every year. I live close to that. I didn't have anything for that. I wanted to get a short story done. I figured that was something at least. Well, as I was writing that, I realized this is more than a short story. There's more to it. There's more characters. It's a bigger world. It's a bigger book. And as I'm writing that book, I'm thinking, well, what about this? And what about this? So suddenly one book became the idea for possibility of 4 to 7 with some other short stories. And the whole world kind of blossomed from there. But in the first book, Samuel has a big, hard time dealing with his father, who is basically the town drunk and everyone disrespects. But it wasn't a major focus of the story, so I didn't explore that. And then once book 1 was ended and Samuel became what he became, the question still remained: what about his father? Now that Samuel is not living at home, not who he used to be, how does that affect that situation with his father? There
right.
was book 2.
Ah, gotcha. So what's the biggest challenge in writing the second book in the series?
The first book again. You got to get that first one done for the second one to even make sense. And it took me a while to get the second one done. And it's almost a little weird to think that it is done. But now I'm excited because I'm working on book 3. Book 2 leads right into the ideas I had for book 3. And because I thought of all these stories that I could do, there are things in book 1 that aren't going to come to realization until book 4. So there's things that are mentioned or hinted at in book 1 that I had plans for book 2, 3, and 4 to lead down the line. And actually possibility of a couple more after that later, but we'll see.
Nice, nice. So did any real life experiences influence the themes of betrayal or hidden truth?
Yeah, you know, I cast magic in the backyard a lot. And no, not really. I just love magic or fantasy. I
Okay.
One of my other series when I was growing up was the Dragonlance series. That was one of my favorites. I've read that multiple times by Weiss and Hickman. Good series. I talked to Margaret Weiss because I was reading her book, and one of the things I got dinged a lot for from editors is I'll head hop or I will, focus on different characters in a chapter, and they said it's confusing. And then I went back and I was reading Dragonlance, and I'm like, well, that's where I got it from. These Dragonlance books do this, it seemed natural to me. And I asked Margaret Weiss, I'm like, so why did you do that? Why'd you get away with it, etc.? She's like, it was a different time. People were different. Reading was different. Writing was different. It was acceptable. No one blinked. Nowadays, you don't do that. So I learned some bad habits from that, but I would say Dragonlance probably inspired me more than anything else in the fantasy writing.
Nice, nice. So Rory is a fascinating mentor character. How did his relationship with Samuel involve in the story?
Well, if you read the first book, there's a short story before that Rory is the town magician, but he's a fake. He doesn't really know magic. He can't do magic. And Samuel's the only one that knows it, and no one will listen to him because he's the kid of the town drunk. Why would we listen to him? So there's an evil magician that challenges Rory to a duel in book one, but Rory doesn't have magic. So he says he's going to go get training from the Grand Wizard, but he's really just buying time. He doesn't know what he's doing. And they go to the Grand Wizard, and Samuel kind of follows along. And there's some things that go on there, but they really discover that Rory really doesn't have magic, and they don't know what they're going to do. And then there's a big climax of book one. I'm not going to give it all away. You could probably figure that out. But in book two, now that Samuel does have magic, what was I going to do with Rory? I didn't want to throw him away because I think the character's fun. And him and Samuel had developed a good friendship. So Rory steps up to become the advisor. He's still got that a little bit of that sneakiness, that, you know, weasel-like quality that he's going to twist the situation to get what he wants. But he's doing it for a good reason, good cause. And he helps Samuel throughout book two and will continue to do so, I hope.
Nice. So, what's your favorite scene in transgression of magic, and why?
Well, the book changed a couple times, direction changed, scenes after I wrote it. I got better over time, which hopefully most of us do as writers. And I realized there were some things not as strong and, you know, not as good. So I like some of the early scenes where the bounty hunter shows up and poor Samuel's trying to control his magic and loses control and gets her soaked. That was fun because I can just picture her in my head, stern, very austere demeanor to her, and she's getting soaked with water like every time she comes around these people. So that was a fun one to do. The ending was not as much fun as the first one, but I think the ending I went with was much stronger than the original ending I was doing for book two. So the whole book is fun, but those early scenes with the bounty hunter and Samuel, I think, are the most fun.
Nice, nice. So, let's talk about embracing the magic. How did the story first take place or take shape?
Like I said, I was writing a short story to use. I only had a little bit of time, so I wanted a short story. And I wanted to do wizards. I wanted to do magic. You know, I wanted that Harry Potter feel. I'm at a Harry Potter festival, and I wanted people to say, oh, look, a book with wizards and magic. That's what we're here for, you know, that type of thing. And it just kind of grew. It seemed too big for just a 7,500 word short story. And that's how the book grew. And as I learned more about writing, learned more about storycraft and structure, I realized that there were parts missing. It's like, well, how did they get to the Grand Wizard and what happened there? And if Samuel knew Rory was fake, you know, how am I going to get Rory to go to the Grand Wizard? Because he wouldn't go to learn magic because he doesn't have any, you know. So it was all these questions that as a reader looking at my story, I had to find answers to. But because I was the writer, I had to write them, not just go read the rest of the book. So it kind of grew just naturally from getting better as a writer, I hope.
Yeah, true. So, do you have pictures of the book or your books right on hand so you can show them?
I do. And I was thinking about that. I usually have a picture of it hanging up in the back, but it fell and the thing broke. So I was like, well, that doesn't work. But yeah, so there's the
nice.
book too. That's without the wording and all that.
Nice.
So the picture that I use was drawn by a man of the name of Tom Zoller. He lives close to me in Cleveland. Great artist. I'm glad I ran into him. The claim to fame that I like to let everybody know is he's got a lot of his own stuff, his own books. He's, you know, he's drawn for others, but he's got a few of his own that are fantastic and fun. The art style fit what I was looking for perfectly. But he was also involved with the My Little Pony reboot from like 10, 12 years ago. So if you go look at any of the My Little Pony comics from that time, you'll see his name in there, Tom Zoller.
Nice, nice. Wow. So what kind of magical system do you use in your cities? Like, how did you design it?
Yeah, so sitting in on various classes and courses for writing conferences up at the library, things like that. They started talking about the details. Brandon Sanderson came up a lot. How everyone has the details of his magic. They know it. They know exactly what person would cast what type of spell with what components and all this and how he built that system up. And I went, oh man, I was just saying I cast magic essentially. I had nothing that detailed, nothing that intense. And I was like, well, how much do I really need? Different writers, different readers. Some readers, when you read Michael Crichton, you read because there's a lot of great scientific stuff in there. He delves into the scientific theories and the things that scientists say and do and all of that. And you read it for that reason. But when you're reading like Baldacci, you want an action. You want something more fast paced. So Sanderson may have had a magic system like written out to where if we could change physics, we have it, all the details, all the blueprint for that magic. There it is. That's great. But I don't know if all of my fifth grade boys, particularly, would want to sit through the details of how a magic system and use these certain lines and certain spell components. That seemed like too much to me, not only for me to think about and figure out, but it seemed like it would slow down my story, and they don't necessarily want to read all the details of that. I could be wrong, but that wasn't the style of story I wanted. So I just cut it down that they channel magic, basically drawing it out of the world. But what they do to use to control it, they have their hands that they grasp their wrist and use their finger to basically draw symbols as they're casting it and hold their hands in different ways to cast different spells. I don't go into details that it has to be this way and, whatever to cast a certain spell. Just more like that's what they're doing.
Neat. So how did these interactive elements support literacy or creativity in young readers?
Well, hopefully fantasy by itself does that. I mean, I would hope kids would read fantasy and spark their creative minds, their imaginations. I did a workshop at a school where I kind of told them the premise is, oh my gosh, I have to get a new story for my editor, but I don't have any ideas. Can you guys help me? And then what we do is they start throwing out ideas. We brainstorm and I write the ideas, but I break it down into the three parts of story, the beginning, middle, and end. And we talk about, well, that's a great idea, but not at the beginning. We should put that in the middle. So we'll put that here and hold on to that. And I work on that. And I can see the kids, here's some old guy coming into my school, giving me a presentation about his book. Woo! Kids don't really care about that,
Yeah.
But when I did this, except for some of the, well, I'm too good for this, those type of kids, I could see the other ones going, oh, I have an idea. Oh, what about this? We could do this. Oh, what about that? They were getting into it. They were getting excited. You could see it. And that's, what I think the creativity and inspiration does for that. I also do some video game classes with video game storytelling, and I have a system that's really easy to use. And I can see the kids that come in and they're like, okay, what is this? They're like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I made a game. Oh, it does this. Wait, I got another idea. And they start going, you can see it just like blowing up in their heads that they start, oh, I got to do this, got to do this. Of course, then you get the other ones that go, okay, I made them jump. Can I play another game? There's always going to be kids that's not their thing. So I'm hoping I can reach kids that it sparks their imagination. They suddenly see, oh my gosh, you mean I can make a video game? Just me can do a video game? That's cool. I can write a book. I can come up with a story, and it sparks them because that's something they can do their whole life. Video games are huge in the world. It's bigger than pro football in America. And if kids see now in like 4th, 5th, 6th grade that they can make a video game and they start making video games, they can do that through school for fun, have a portfolio and have a job when they get out of school. Writing books, maybe they like to write and they're writing a play, or maybe they write the story for a video game. There's all sorts of avenues. I just think sometimes we don't explore those while they're going through school, and some kids don't even realize that, hey, I as a person can write a book. I as a person can make a story or write a video game story. I, as a person, can do all these things, and we don't always explore that. So I take it as my mission to help
Yeah,
kids explore and understand that these skills are things they can do. Now, does that mean
yeah.
every kid I talk to is going to be an author and a multi-million seller book? Not necessarily. Can they do it as a fun hobby their whole lives?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Could it grow into something more? Absolutely. How many people do you know that went to school to be accountants, but they're not accountants? So it's
Right.
really no different. This is just something that if they have the enjoyment and skill for, they might pursue it and have an enjoyable life with that.
That's true. That's true. And speaking of that, I interviewed a little girl. Well, she's not a little girl. She's 14. I interviewed her and she wrote 23 books. So,
Holy jeez.
so you're right.
What
You're
was
right.
what was her name?
Her name is Shanti Henderson. I have
I,
her on there. Yeah, she's
I
she's
think I've not run into her personally, but I ran across her name. I used to do a podcast and I ran across her name when I was doing
oh
that. So,
yeah, man. So what feedback have you received from kids or parents that meant a lot to you?
oh, uh, well, I did a show a couple weeks ago, and the one parent like tagged me on Facebook later and said, "Oh, you made her day. This is great." And I'm like, "Awesome!" That's the type of feedback you want. And I had a friend that him and his kid read the first book. And he came and he says, "All right, my son's been asking me, it's been a couple months. Where's book two?" I'm like, "Well, I'm working on it." He's like, "Well, he's really excited. He wants it." So I'm like, "Oh, cool." So I sent them an early copy of the book. So that's what you want is people that actually read it and enjoy it and get back to you that, hey, this was good. I want to find out what else happens.
Nice, nice. So what advice would you give a kid who wants to be a fantasy author?
Just do it. Go start writing your stories. Go play D&D and be the dungeon master and make up campaigns for your people. That's a story that you have actors playing with you. That can give you the whole Dragonlance series was based on Dungeons and Dragons campaigns that the authors played in with their play group. That's what it was based on. And the characters were based on the characters that their friends had made up for the game. Go do it. Write down those stories. You know what? If you're in fifth grade and you have an idea for a story and you write that story, it may not become a number one bestseller. You may not become a millionaire on it. In fact, you probably won't, to be honest. But you know what? You've got a story written, and there's probably nobody else in your school that has written a story. You're way ahead of the curve right there. And guess what? The next story you write is going to be better and easier and even more exciting to me as the adult. If you keep writing stories for 5, 6, 7 years in school, by the time you get out, you're going to be a fantastic author and storyteller. And then you have a really good chance of having a book that is so good, it could be number one on the charts and it could make you a lot of money. And then you won't have to be necessarily going through 4 more years of school. You won't
Yeah,
necessarily have to be waking up at a certain time to go to a spot for a job because they told you that's what you got to do. You may be happier with what you do, but it takes some work and time. Start now. Just don't do it because I'm in fifth grade. I want to write a best-selling novel right now. I want to write something that gets number one on the charts right now. Don't do that. Just write your stories. Just make them fun and exciting and improve on the next one. That's
yes.
the best advice.
Yeah, that's really great advice. What's the key to creating a magical world that feels real?
Be a kid. See the world as a kid. Pretend you're in Neverland with Peter Pan. Read Alice in Wonderland and imagine Wonderland. There's too many adults that can't be a kid. When Star Wars: The Force Awakens came out in 2015, I was so excited because I took my kids to it. They were old enough to go to the theater and watch it, and it was a new Star Wars. I was very excited for it. And my son at the time, he was like 14, 15. And he like looks over at me. He says, "Dear God, Father," he's like, "you're sitting there waving your legs back and forth like you're a 12-year-old waiting for the circus." And I laughed. And that's really that's what it has to be. If you can't go see a fantasy, if you can't watch Star Wars as if you were 12 years old, you're not going to really get it. You're missing out on life. And that's, how I am, how I try and view life. And sometimes people look at you a little weird. It's like, what are you doing? But Harry Potter did the same thing for a whole new generation. There were
Yeah.
people that got so into Harry Potter and they still are, and it's a magical world to them. But if you can see the actual world in that way, you will find stories out there.
Yeah, that's true. So, do you collaborate with your kids or test ideas with young readers?
I do try to. My son is older now, but he's a good beta reader for my books. He'll flat out tell me, "Yeah, this got boring, or this wasn't good, or this doesn't sound right for this character," and he'll make notes in the margins. And
Oh, wow.
he's one of the few people that will read an early version of my book and give me really good feedback. At least I should say he's one of the few people that does that I don't have to pay. Um, so yeah, I try, and that's why I try and get out with shows and stuff with kids to interact with them. And I ask them, if they're carrying a stuffed animal or if they have other books. I'm like, oh, what are you reading right now? Was that a good book? I try and find out things. I'm no longer a Girl Scout leader or Boy Scout leader. I don't coach softball. I'm not I don't go to the meetings for the Boy Scouts or whatever. So I don't daily interact with kids like I used to, but I hope I got something out of all those years that now I can put that back into the books. And hopefully, as I do more, I'll get more kids that know me and want to come back to tell me what they liked about the book.
Oh, okay, nice. So, what inspired you to help kids write not just books but video game stories?
It just clicked on me one day. So like I said, I was soccer coach, softball coach, baseball coach, Girl Scout leader, Cub Scout leader, Boy Scout leader. I did so many. I was in martial arts, leading classes for kids. I did so many things when my kids were younger with kids, and I've always had that, uh, you know, feel, I guess, of helping kids, working with kids. They're much more fun than adults most of the time, and and so I always had the idea of putting in my books things for teachers. I have words to know. I have discussion questions. I have writing prompts in my books about the books. And I always wanted to try and help kids be inspired to write. I was at a conference, and don't even remember now what exactly they were talking about. I think it was serial fiction or something like that. And I don't know what it was, but it clicked into my brain. It's like, you know what? I love to play video games. I have my whole life. Kids love to play video games. And you know what? Being a narrative designer is a job now in video games. You can get hired to do stories. It's like, why don't I work with telling or teaching kids how to tell stories in video games? That seems like the most fun to me ever. So that's what I started to do. And it's been great. I've got some books coming out for the video game series because I've been teaching some classes. So I want to do these books to go with it and inspire kids and get them to see. It's like, wow, you mean people like me write those stories for video games and I could go do that? Again, let them know they can do it.
Nice. That's very nice. It's like a positive influence on kids nowadays. They kind of need that right now.
That's how I always feel. I think kids have always needed it. I think now it's a little even tougher for them because with the internet, I see so many parents just shoving screens at their kids. Is like here,
Yeah.
and they're so passive. They're just sitting there watching video and not even stories. They're just watching, oh, look at this video of somebody doing something stupid. Oh, look at this video of this guy doing something stupid. Hey, look, I've done that for 6.5 hours straight. That's never going to spark their minds, never going to help their minds grow and see the world. And people are like, well, it's fantasy. They don't need yeah. It's been shown to really help with anxiety. It's been shown to help kids feel like they have some control of their lives by having that fantasy world. And it's something adults lose. And then they wonder why they're unhappy with their lives. Well, maybe you need a little bit more fantasy in your life. When we were going through COVID, multiple times I saw things that's like, people need to maybe just pick up a book, shut down the TV, shut down the news, turn off the thing, pick up a book, read a book. It's like, well, there you go, folks. And if you're not going to read a book about murders and gangs and shootings or whatever, pick up a fantasy. You got dragons, you got princesses, you've got all sorts of fun things, magic, you know?
Yeah, that's true. So, have you ever considered turning your books into a game or an interactive experience?
Yes, I actually the system I use, the Bloxels system, is actually book 3, thinking of how I could turn some of that into a game within that system. And I've got another series I'm working on called Oddish Questers that it's a group of siblings that hunt like Bigfoot and things like that. And think of it as Scooby Doo meets the X Files. That's how I'm trying to do it. And in the book, the kids have, well, as you know, I have a wolf. His name's Hunter. And I put Hunter in the book of the Oddish Questers to help them hunt for Bigfoot and search for that. I have a video game I was working on in the Bloxels system where Hunter is trying to help protect cryptids. So he goes on a quest to find Bigfoot, to find Mothman, to find Chupacabra, and warn them about hunters. So you're Hunter the wolf in the video game trying to find Bigfoot so you can warn them, and then trying to find the other creatures. So I'm working on that. Again, time, with as an adult with a job and writing books, sometimes I don't always get to work on the video games as much as I'd like.
Nice. As an adult, I would be interested in playing that game.
I'll,
Not
I'll,
gonna.
I'll, I'll let you know. You can check it out.
Nice. So, how can schools better support creative writing in the classrooms?
Oh my gosh. How about we start with schools just supporting creative writing in the classroom? I don't think it's as supported as it could be. One of my big problems, and I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator, so people want to jump on me about that. But I've seen kids, I've worked with kids, and I was a kid myself at one time. And I think one of the problems, and a lot of teachers I've talked with have said, yeah, that's pretty accurate. One of the problems I see is we start right off after they learn their letters, after they learn to read, we start right off with spelling lists, and we start right off with teaching them grammar and structure of a sentence. And these kids barely know how to read 3-letter words, and we're starting to have them, learn spelling and have grammar of a sentence and what is a noun and all that. That's great. I'm not saying they don't need to learn that, but the problem is it's the cart before the horse scenario. They have not read hardly anything in their lives to know what writing really is. They need to know a little bit about what writing really is before they can understand that. And I think if we stopped worrying so much about the nouns and verbs and pronouns and spelling in the younger grades, that if we just told them, hey, let's come up with a story and write it, that as they wrote multiple stories, even if it's just a page or something like that, then when we go in and start showing them how to spell, if we start showing them the structure of a story or a sentence, it makes more sense to them. It's like, oh, I remember I was writing this and I see how that word was spelled wrong, or I'm writing this new thing and I learned how to spell this word correctly. It makes more sense to them. And I say that because I learned that way. I go to conferences and I've seen some people at the same conferences over and over. And I'm like, so how's your book? They're like, oh, I'm still working on it. I'm like, you've been working on that one book for 6 years. And they're like, well, yeah, but I keep having to learn, and I keep coming to these conferences to learn. And I've got 300 books I've got to read about writing. I'm like, well, maybe you should just write something first. And that's when I kind of realized that I learned the most about writing after I had written stuff already. My writing got better, but the lessons didn't mean anything. They were so nebulous to me when I was trying to read rules and memorize writing rules, but it was just, not connected to writing. But once I wrote a couple books, everything I learned makes a lot more sense and my writing gets better faster. So I just think in the younger grades, forget about the technical stuff. Just have kids write. Have every year, you should have kids having stories, and they could compile their own book every year that they're in school, and their writing would be better. The spelling would be better. The grammar would be better because they've written all that. But we teach them all these rules and stuff and then just forget about it. And it's like, well, what do I got to do? How many times did we say, and does every kid say, well, what do I need this for in my life? Well,
Right.
here, remember all the writing you did? That's why you need this.
Right, right. I agree with you 1,000%. Just let the kids write.
Yeah.
Like, forget about the grammar, forget about the punctuation. Just let them write.
Yeah, that stuff will come. It will get better. But the thing that we also got to understand and realize is how much are they really going to need some of that nowadays? Everything I've got corrects all of my punctuation, corrects all my writing. Even my phone, when I'm typing in things, it corrects it all.
Yeah.
So it's harder to make sense of having to learn how to spell when everything tells you how to spell correctly anyway.
Yeah.
I agree they should learn how to spell, but we got to be realistic about it too. How important is it compared to 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Yeah. True, true. So, what fantasy world would you live in if you could? One
Star
of your
Wars.
own, or okay,
No
Star Wars,
question.
completely Star Wars.
Yep, that's been my life, part of my life, my whole life since I was a kid. Even with, we could have a whole discussion what the problems are with Star Wars nowadays, what's good and what's bad. And a lot of people disagree with me on what's good and bad nowadays. That's fine, but it's been that fantasy for me my whole life. So if I could live in
Wow.
one, that would be it. In fact, I'd love to write for Star Wars, but I
Yes.
don't I don't think I'm going to get a license to do that. I do have a serial fiction story idea that is, if you read it, once I write it, if you read it, it may look very, very close to Star Wars without actually being the Star Wars names and all of that. So we'll just say that.
Wow. So, do you have the Disney Plus app so that you can watch all the Star Wars? Like,
Yep, we've had it since day one. In fact, I signed up for it before it was ready. Partly because the age my kids were at, they had all the Marvel stuff and all the Star Wars stuff at the time. So I'm like, of course, I want to see all of that. We enjoy it, the good and the bad. We could have a whole discussion on which ones are good and bad. For me, most of it's good in Star Wars, and I enjoy it. Oh my gosh, did you see Skeleton Crew on Star Wars? That is the best. It's a true kids story Star Wars, and it was so much fun. If you haven't seen Skeleton Crew, everybody go watch Skeleton Crew. It was very fun. But
oh
of
my
course, too
God.
many people said, I don't like this, so they are not going to do another season. And I want to scream because it was so much fun. It's such a middle grade kids story. They had robot trash crabs that had parts of robots as their shells. It
What?
was very cool.
Man. So, what was your oh no, that's wrong. What do you do when you're stuck in creativity? Like, what do you do when you're stuck?
That doesn't happen to me a whole lot, though I do tend to, the initial pass at a story for me tends to be more mellow and bland. But once I get it down and I think about it, I make it more exciting and fun. So I don't usually have problems with, I've got like 3 books right now that I'm working on, 3 stories I'm working on. So if I'm in town magician world and nothing's clicking, I'm not figuring out what to do next, I jump over to Oddish Questers and delve into Bigfoot and searching for that. So it changes my thinking. I also have a couple, like the video games. I could always jump into video games if I'm not getting the writing. The video games I can spark with or create. But I also have a couple board games I'm working on, me and my son. So I've got these creative endeavors down the road. So if I'm not clicking and writing's just not doing it for me today, I go jump and work on one of the board games. And I've always got something I'm working on.
Nice, nice. So, what's next for Samuel and the Town Musician series?
Well, I don't want to give it all away. Ending of book 2, but book 3 picks up right where book 2 ends. It's a kind of a cliffhanger at the end of book 2. Sends Samuel and Rory off on an adventure that was kind of hinted at in the first book, like I mentioned. There's a quest they need to go on. It's got new characters to bring into the story, which will also then appear in book 4 later. And there's a new mission in Samuel's life that he has to accomplish here in book 3 because the Grand Wizard is having trouble. and he wants to help the Grand Wizard. And this is what he's got to do, this mission, this quest. And what happens in it, I think, is going to be interesting. And what happens at the end is going to be interesting. And things that it bring about. More changes in Samuel's life once again.
Nice, amazing. I look forward to it. So, my last and final question for you is, how can listeners find your books and connect with you in your world?
Everything I do is at my website, sa-schneider.com. And Schneider is Schneider. It's the German spelling, not the American. And I put everything up there. I've got resources for teachers. I have my short stories that go with the books. I put out short stories at Christmas and Halloween. I try to each year that delve into the lives of the characters at the holidays, things like that. So it's a lot's up there.
Nice, nice. So, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today and chatting with me.
It's been great, Brooke. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You have a great day.
Thanks, you too, ma'am.
Bye. Hey everyone, I want to thank you all so much for listening to my interview with S.A. Schneider. You can go to his website, like he said, to go purchase his books and for other resources. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all have a great day and see you next time for the next interview. Bye.